It's 2009, and the Penguins have just won the Stanley Cup. It took 7 games for the Pens to win their rematch against the Red Wings, ending Detroit's seemingly endless dynasty and hoping to take their place. The 10-year-old boy from central Pennsylvania cheered and jumped for joy. He'd been born into a Penguins family, and though he cheered for the Rangers too because of a Wayne Gretzky action figure he had, he'd started devotedly watching the Penguins in Crosby's rookie season. Crosby's first year was an ugly one for the Penguins, a team still trying to find themselves and just thankful to be alive after they were nearly sent to Kansas City. Crosby was as advertised, though, and his help arrived in the form of fellow centers and top 2 picks Evgeny Malkin and Jordan Staal. The Penguins began to establish themselves. After the 2008 trade for Marian Hossa and run to the Stanley Cup final ended in defeat at the hands of the Wings, the then 9-year-old kid from rural PA cried. There were no tears after Game 7 of the 2009 final, nor after Game 6 for that matter, a game the boy was lucky enough to be at, surrounded by the happiest drunk idiots he'd ever seen, watching defenseman Rob Scuderi make 3 saves in the crease to seal the victory for his Pens. That boy, as some of you may have guessed, was me. Surely the Penguins would win every Stanley Cup for the rest of my life. As is the typical tax of winning in a salary cap league, the Penguins were going to lose some pieces. In the 2008 offseason, Crosby, Malkin, the reigning scoring champion, goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury, and shutdown workhorse Brooks Orpik got their raises. Staal re-upped for $4 million times 4 years in January, and now in the 2009 offseason, the Penguins are very close to out of money, with contributors to varying degrees like Bill Guerin, Miro Shatan, Peter Sikora, Hal Gill, Rob Scuderi, and even backup goaltender Matthew Garon, all unsigned and headed for free agency. But first, the draft. The Penguins bolster their future on the blue line with the big 2-way Simone Dupré in the first round and later Philip Samuelsson, son of former Penguin and the oft-loathed Ulf Samuelsson. No trades at the draft for the Pens. They were in negotiation mode. They do get the popular veteran leadership presence Bill Guerin at $2 million for the upcoming 2010 season. It spells the end for the remaining UFAs, but during the Stanley Cup run, the chemistry Guerin built on the top line with Kunitz and Crosby was crucial to why he is the man back. $2 million for a guy the Penguins expect to play on the top line is good business. As July 1st and free agency hits, the expected happens. Gill goes to Montreal, Garon to Columbus as some insurance behind phenom Steve Mason, Scuderi gets a ton of money to head to the Kings, Sikora and Shatan have to wait for a while because of the cap really starting to crunch teams, but they eventually ink deals with the Wild and Bruins respectively. The Penguins sift through the bargain bin. Their big signing is Mike Rupp, who they give 2 years at $8.25K per. Rupp is coming off a season where he was just 3 goals short of his career high. Unfortunately, that career high is 6. He's a 4th liner who will fight people.
He comes to the present, and down he goes!
To offset their losses on defense, the Pens add the recently bought out Jay McKee for a 1-year prove-it deal at $800,000. McKee had a bad run after getting a huge payday from the Blues, but he was a very solid middle-pairing defenseman for the Sabres during their 2006 run to the conference final.
Rasmussen pivoting on the outside, shakes one to the slot, moving on in, McKay scores! Jay McKee!
He'll only be 32 to start the season, and a return to form isn't completely out of the question. It's worth the gamble for him on a contract essentially subsidized by St. Louis. Closer to the start of the season, they'll add a similar reclamation project in Martin Skula, who could theoretically fill the Gill role as the big bottom pairing guy. Amongst the wealth of league minimum guys, the Pens sign a backup for just a touch over the minimum. Brent Johnson has been a perfectly average goalie in terms of save percentage over the past 2 seasons, and the advanced numbers tell a similar story. The veteran netminder isn't exactly a guy who can challenge Fleury for starts, but for $525,000, he'll be a suitable backup. So with all the departures and the additions, what does this team look like? The top line is, of course, centered by Sidney Crosby, the current best hockey player in the world, rivaled only by Alex Ovechkin in Washington, and another Russian we'll touch on shortly.
Fires net a backhander. Hey! Shoots and scores! Up high over the glove hand of your own.
Sid's wingers are, as mentioned, Chris Kunitz and Bill Guerin. Kunitz is a relentless forechecker and plays with the compete level expected from an undrafted free agent, but don't overlook his offensive upside. Even prior to Crosby, he already hit 20 goals twice. Guerin isn't a 40-goal scorer anymore, but he's still good for 20 year in and year out. Centering the second line is Evgeny Malkin, who, while not as complete a player as Crosby, is close to as good, if not better.
Malkin burrowing, he's out. Oh my word! Evgeny Malkin, spectacular!
Malkin is, as I mentioned, the reigning scoring champion and is fresh off 2 second-place finishes for the Hart Trophy, losing out to Ovechkin both times.
Basket hanging, in solo, winds and scores! Evgeny Malkin says, take that!
He's lost his scoring winger Sikora, but his place had been taken in the playoffs by the more defensive-minded Max Talbot, who wasn't as potent a scorer, but could offset Malkin's defensive and face-off deficiencies. Should Talbot move back to his fourth-line center role he played during most of the 2009 regular season, the speedy Pascal Dupuis would likely move up to Malkin's wing. The constant at Malkin's side is the not high-scoring but consistently clutch Ruslan Fedotenko. The third line is the matchup line with shutdown two-way center Jordan Staal, the widely loathed Matt Cooke, and the shoot first, second, and sometimes third winger Tyler Kennedy.
This is Josh Yohe at The Athletic, here to talk some mid-teens Penguins, I guess it is. Jordan Staal is one of the best defensive forwards of this era. He scored 29 goals his rookie year, and a lot of people thought this guy was just a two-way superstar who was going to score 30 or 40 goals a year. You know, his skill level really wasn't of a player who was going to score like that. He played on Evgeny Malkin's line that year, which is, I think, a big reason why he scored that many goals, but he was the best third-line center in hockey. He was a force for a long time. He's still pretty good. Back then, he was a force. If your team game planning against the Penguins, you've got Crosby and Malkin to stop. That in and of itself, they were probably the 2 best centers in the league then on the same team.
Right.
Then you consider the third-line guys, this guy who can completely shut down your top line, who can still score. So he was a force, especially back then. Matt Cooke was just kind of your classic old-school good third-line player. I know he has a reputation, and deservedly so, for being one of the dirtiest players of his era, but he was also a pretty good player. You know, he was a ferocious hitter. He could score 15 goals a year. He was a good penalty killer. He just did a lot of good things to help you win games. Tyler Kennedy himself was a former 20-goal scorer, kind of a shot-first guy who was kind of like a little bumblebee buzzing around, shooting the puck a lot. Those three just had chemistry. They won the series against Detroit in 2009.
Behind for Kennedy, tries to get front, Kennedy!
The recently acquired Rupp, puncher Goddard, and the defense-only Craig Adams round out the forward group. The defense is led by veteran power play quarterback and Malkin's best friend, Sergei Gonchar. Gonchar typically pairs with complementary heavy hitter Brooks Orpik. Young defenseman Alex Goligoski will likely see the increase in role that fellow youngster Chris Letang saw in 2009. McKee, Skula, and the unexciting but extremely sound Mark Eaton will make up the remainder of the top 7, in front of workhorse starter Marc-Andre Fleury and the aforementioned Johnson. Off the ice, the Penguins are led by GM Ray Shero, who had taken the reins from the long-tenured Craig Patrick in 2009 to shepherd the Penguins back into success after the lean post-Yager years. Shero hired coach Dan Bylsma just last year to replace the perpetually scowling Michel Therrien. Bylsma, younger and more affable than his predecessor, lit a fire underneath the Penguins and led them to their 3rd Stanley Cup, becoming only the 4th midseason hire in the league's history to accomplish the feat. Bylsma is an intensely system-oriented coach, sometimes even to the point of overcomplication. But when his scheme clicks, the Penguins look unstoppable.
Forwards are getting to the offensive zone. Let's grind these bitches down here, hey?
The Penguins are ready to march toward their third straight Stanley Cup final and their franchise's second back-to-back. The banner ascends on opening night as the Pens square off against an extremely weird Rangers team with their newly acquired star Marian Gaborik. Wade Redden's here, Vinny Prospal, Alish Kotelik, a bunch of guys making very short stops in New York. The Penguins' banner is also in a temporary home, as the Pens will move across the strait to their brand new arena next year. The Russian Pens connect to open the scoring. Then Goddard and Donald Brashear fight for no real reason. Thanks, guys.
The general manager of that team was Ray Shero, whose dad was the coach of the Broad Street Bullies. Ray believed in that kind of hockey to some extent. He did. Ray and Dan Bylsma, they like guys who drop the gloves.
Drury scores to tie the game, but quick goals from Crosby and Kennedy build a lead the Rangers can't surmount, despite the third period efforts of Gaborik. The Pens just tear out of the gate. Including the Rangers game, the defending champs go 9-1 to start the season, including a hard-fought road win against their bitter cross-state rivals, the Philadelphia Flyers. It's the pair of stars, Crosby and Malkin, doing the majority of the scoring with 13 and 10 points respectively. But it's also a great start for Fleury, who goes 8-0 with a .926 save percentage. Brent Johnson is sound too, though he's in net for the only loss. The Devils cool the streak, but the Penguins get right back to business, thumping the Habs in their next game. Bad news comes before the October 30th game against the Blue Jackets. Malkin, who had been an Iron Man since being run over by his teammate John LeClaire in his first season in North America, would miss at least 2 weeks nursing his shoulder. The Penguins have been molten to start the year on the back of their two superstars. Losing half of that contingent is cause for concern. Soon after Gino's departure, the Penguins drop 4 straight and look bad doing it. The team is still strong. This losing streak isn't a death sentence by any means, but it touches on a few of this team's flaws. The forward depth needs a little help. Fleury can suddenly burst into flames, and this team is uniquely sensitive to agitators, as exemplified by Jay McKee losing his mind against the Sharks. Malkin returns with a 3-assist night and a 6-5 overtime win against Boston, and the team that went just 2-5 without the Russian star resumes their buzzsaw status. The Pens fight through some close games, but they just keep winning. Malkin, of course, is a big help to the team. It always helps to have a superstar come back. Jordan Staal and his line mates Matt Cooke and Tyler Kennedy, when he's healthy, are a matchup nightmare for opposing top lines, but Crosby is unstoppable, as the Penguins go 13-3-1 from mid-November to mid-December. The dominance peaks against the Rangers as Crosby lights them up in the first half of a back-to-back for 3 goals and 2 assists, a game with Matt Cooke and Sean Avery really in peak form. Matt Cooke blows Artem Anisimov's head off, ducks a fight with Donald Brashear, and finally gets tossed after a fight with Ryan Callahan, while Avery goes after the Penguin stars before attacking. Ruslan Fedotenko? Why him? Everyone is nicer in the second half of the back-to-back, including Sid, who merely scores twice and has 1 assist, a feat he duplicates the next night against the Avs, for a total of 7 goals and 11 points in 3 games. The goal scoring so far has set Crosby's 2010 apart from his prior 4 seasons. Throughout the 4 years of his career, Crosby has logged 100 points 3 times, with the only exception being in 2008, where he was limited to just 53 games because of a high ankle sprain. However, he's yet to eclipse 40 goals, coming closest with 39 in his rookie year, with definitively the worst supporting cast. As the team around him has improved, Sid has shot less in each season, and while his shooting percentage has stayed consistent at about 14%, he deferred more, especially on the power play to the one-timers of Malkin, Gonchar, and the now-departed Sikora. This season, he is doing no such thing. He's shooting a ton, and on top of that, his shooting percentage has clicked up to 18%, resulting in him being on pace for 54 goals through 29 games. The defending Cup champions may have lost some depth, but their best player is only getting better. Right before the Christmas break, the Penguins, who had survived multi-week injuries from each of their top 4 defensemen, Gonchar, Letang, Goligoski, and Orpik, throttle the Senators, who knocked them out of the playoffs in Malkin's rookie season what seems like eons ago. Despite the oft-overlapping injuries, the Penguins go to spend time with their families with a tremendous 26-11-1 record, aided by their perfect 6-0 in shootouts, where their extremely athletic goalie shined.
Nope.
They are on pace for 114 points, which would be the team's second highest mark in history, behind only the 1993 two-time defending champion, President's Trophy winner that had 400-point scorers, a Norris finalist, a Vezina finalist, and Jaromir Jagr. Thanks a lot, David Volek. As long as they don't come out of the break asleep at the wheel, they'll cruise to an Atlantic Division title. They immediately lose to the Leafs, who suck in an extremely painful fashion. Fleury gives up some real howlers, especially to Jason Blake, who gives the Leafs a 3-2 lead they cling to, until the three-headed monster of Crosby, Malkin, and goal scorer Mike Rupp scores with just 2 minutes remaining. Seconds later, Ian White just blasts a shot past Fleury to stick the Penguins with a regulation loss in a game where they surely thought they had at least 1 point locked up. The next game, the Penguins respond, lighting up the pending Vezina winner Ryan Miller for 3 quick goals, chasing the Sabres' star. Only one of 3 times the netminder was yanked in 2010 across his 67 starts. Former Penguin phenom Patrick Lalime takes the net and blanks the Penguins completely. Drew Stafford scores on a penalty shot, then scores again, then Gostad, then Pominville. Sabres win. The last game of the 2009 calendar year comes against the Devils, the Pens' primary challenger for the division, with backup Brent Johnson in net. Nicholas Bergfors scores almost immediately, and that proves to be the death knell against the Devils and their coach, the returning trap pioneer Jacques Lemaire. Johnson only gave up that 1 goal, but Martin Brodeur shuts out the Penguins for their 3rd straight loss. The new year sees a 4th loss in a row for the Penguins, and this time to another bad team in the Tampa Bay Lightning. Only Guerin scores against the team that will finish 2010 4th worst in goals against, while undesirable Zenon Konopka and Steve Downey put the Penguins away. Well, the Panthers, probably the worst team of the bunch, is next. The Penguins roar out of the gate to a 2-0 lead and just bombard Tomas Vokoun, but the Panthers scorch them with deadly scores like Steve Reinprecht and a hat trick from Radek Dvorak. Jeez. The Pens snap the streak against the Thrashers just before meeting the rival Flyers for the 4th time on the year. Sid, Gino, and company were yet to fall to the Flyers, winning each of their team's first 3 meetings, and come on, Mark, make a save! The Penguins' finishing has hit a skid, but they're still dominating play. They just aren't getting any help from their franchise goalie. After the Flyers game, Fleury's save percentage sits at .903, painfully low for the era, and the netminder's lowest since his first foray as a starter in 2006. The Penguins still weren't in any danger of missing the playoffs, but the fear that their goaltending could crap out at any second was palpable. The Penguins get their feet underneath them as the goal scoring picks back up, and Bylsma focuses more on limiting the point shots the team had previously been willing to surrender. With the team somewhat stabilized, many Penguins head to Vancouver for the Olympics. Crosby and Fleury join Team Canada, Malkin and Gonchar to Russia, and Orpik to Team USA. The Olympics go very well for Crosby.
Again, let's start this war! Sidney Crosby, the golden goal! And Canada has won!
Immediately, it's trade deadline time, and the Penguins make a big splash, sending a second-round pick to Florida for Jordan Leopold. Leopold is one of the better defensemen available, and is definitely better than Denis Grebeshkov and Andy Sutton, the other 2 D-men to go for second-round picks. Leopold is a strong shooter and a good two-way defenseman, but the power play minutes he got in Florida simply won't be available in Pittsburgh behind Gonchar, Goligoski, and Letang. He's a good player, but maybe a bit of a weird fit for the role the Penguins will slot him in. With Leopold in the fold, Martin Skula, who had already lost his job to Mark Eaton, was a redundancy. So off he went to Toronto, along with 21-year-old roster player Luka Caputi for Alexei Ponikarovsky. Ponikarovsky is a massive forward and has really become an ultra-consistent 20-goal scorer and is seen as the perfect winger for Malkin. His defensive impacts are sterling and he can drive a bit of his own offense. They might not have wanted to give up Caputi, but what an acquisition for the Penguins. Pony is also best friends with the slumping Penguin forward and fellow Ukrainian Ruslan Fedotenko. If Bonikarovsky can get Fedotenko going like he was in the playoffs last spring, there's no reason this team couldn't reach the finals for a third year in a row.
Fedotenko trying to get it across, then score!
The Penguins win 4 straight after Leopold joined them, with Bonikarovsky playing and recording points in the latter 2 games. But no one is talking about the Penguins' acquisitions after the win on March 7th against the Bruins.
But here's Lucic into the zone. Drops it off, and a high shot sails over the shoulder. One of the Bruins just got blasted.
Matt Cooke, the hit just as that shot was released.
It's a horrific hit from Cooke. One I've talked about in depth before, but it's a dangerous hit, and it leads to the end of Marc Savard's career.
I remember that game so well. It was a Sunday afternoon, and the next day at practice, I was talking with Bill Guerin, and he was just shaking his head, and he was visibly upset with Matt Cooke. He hated that hit. And I remember talking with some other big names in the Penguins locker room. Brooks Orpik was another one. And Brooks Orpik played a violent game. He was a big hitter. He could cross the line at times, although I don't think Brooks was a dirty player. But guys who throw a lot of hits, every now and then you're going to throw a bad one. That's reality. He was just disgusted by that hit. And I know Mario Lemieux wasn't happy about it. And I know Sidney Crosby wasn't happy about it, especially because, you know, when you have a guy who plays that way, and if you're Sidney Crosby, you know what you're thinking. God, they're going to be coming after me now. I've been told this story numerous times now. There's a game in 1993. This is off topic, but whatever.
Yeah, that's fine.
The Rangers are going after Mario. All right, they were taking runs at him, and Rick Tocchet was Mario's right wing at the time. So you think he would, fight a Ranger or go after their enforcer? No. During a TV timeout, Tocchet skated up to Mark Messier, who was captain of the Rangers, and he said, "Hey, Mess, we're friends. I respect you, but I'm telling you right now, if anyone touches Mario again, I'm gonna fucking kill you." And Messier literally turned around to the bench and said, "That's enough, guys."
Cooke goes unpunished for the hit, but he doesn't need to do this kind of thing. It gets lost in his forest of dangerous hits, but Cooke is a good player. He's a good tertiary scorer and tremendous penalty killer. He's part of the Penguins' matchup line with Stahl and Kennedy. He can play. Instead, he focuses on hurting people, a stark contrast to his lovable off-ice personality. It's beyond frustrating.
I remember feeling sick to my stomach just sitting there in the press box looking at it. It was one of the worst hits I've ever seen. And honestly, there wasn't one guy in that locker room that defended Matt Cooke for that hit.
The Pens play the Bruins again a week and a half later, and though Cooke gets beaten senseless by Sean Thornton, the Pens shut out the preoccupied Bruins. The Penguins, by their standards, limp to the finish line at 5-4-2 in their last 11 games. They only beat one playoff team during that stretch, the 88-point Flyers, who will need a shootout win in the final game to even make the postseason. This team might just be out of gas. While they've improved in terms of expected goals and puck possession post-deadline, Fleury is really becoming an issue they can't overcome. He's a sub-900 goalie, and Johnson is even worse. The pair surrendered 11.63 goals above expected after the trade deadline, an astronomical number for just a month of games. If the Penguins meet a team in the playoffs with a goalie that is any good, they're in danger. The only real positive is Crosby breaking 50 goals for the first time in his career and winning his first Rocket Richard trophy. The Penguins' pedestrian home stretch cost them a very winnable Atlantic Division, which the Devils win with just 103 points, 2 more than the Penguins' 101. So the latter sits in the 4 seed instead of the 2. Luckily for the Penguins, there are only 4 teams that are any good in the East. Them, the Devils, the Northeast winning Sabres, and the President's Trophy winning Young Guns Capitals. The 5th best team in the East, the Penguins' first-round opponents, the Ottawa Senators, finished with 94 points, which, had they been in the West, would not have been good enough to even make the playoffs. On another lucky note for the Penguins, the Senators do not even have remotely good goaltending. They have Brian Elliott, who kinda stinks, and Pascal Leclerc, who really stinks. The Senators are old at the top of their lineup with their captain and best player Daniel Alfredsson at 37 and their fourth leading scorer Alex Kovalev at 36. Their number one defenseman is Philip Kuba. The Penguins should bulldoze this team. Did they just lose game one?
The Penguins, a furious attempt at coming back to tie this game, but the goal by Jarkko Ruutu holds up.
Hey, Mark, I love you, buddy, but please, I'm begging you, stop the puck. Greg Adams scored tonight. He didn't do that a single time in 82 regular season games. Please, Mark, this is a good team. You just have to be average. Game 2 will...
Now to Regan, his shot, he scores on the first shot. He fires it over the glove.
Crosby takes it upon himself to tie the game, but Andy Sutton kills Jordan Leopold, leaving the Penguins with just 5 defensemen. The remaining D-men lock the Senators down well, and Fleury steps up, stopping the Sens' last 19 shots as Chris Letang nets the game winner late in the third.
Moves it out to the point to Letang. His shot, score! Chris Letang!
Jay McKee draws back into the lineup for Game 3, and the Penguins finally score first, with Podkorovsky whipping a puck under Brian Elliott. Peter Regan appears to extend his streak of torturing the Penguins, but the goal is called back for a kick. Mike Fisher ties the game for real in the second, assisted by Regan, but the Penguins take control with goals by Malkin and the boo-showered Crosby, with the latter serving as the game winner. Pittsburgh has their feet under them now. Malkin opens the scoring, but that's it for the first period. It's the second where things really take off. Kunitz overcomes what Penguins color commentator Phil Bourque labels as a mauling by Anton Volchenkov to feed Crosby for a goal off the rush. Elliott turns the puck over to Max Talbot immediately after the Crosby goal, and Matt Cooke buries it. The Senators call a timeout. Crosby strikes again just 2 minutes later, and the desperate Sens march out Pascal Leclerc. Chris Neal finally responds for the Sens, but immediately after scoring, he shoves Chris Letang to the ice for no reason and takes a penalty. The Sens kill that penalty off, and Daniel Alfredsson scores, making it a bit of a game just over halfway through the second. Then play grinds to a halt as Matt Cullen slams Orpik into the wall hard enough to pop out the glass. The glass popping out halted a Senators scoring chance on their power play. The second it was popped back in, Max Talbot scored a one-handed shorty.
Short-handed again. Talbot's going to the net in front. He redirects it in! And the Penguins have a 5th goal. Max!
On the same power play, now a 5-on-3 after Jay McKee took a hooking penalty, Matt Cullen brings the Senators back within 2. 5 minutes later, the longest the second had gone without a goal, Kunitz blasts one home, his most crushing goal against the Sens in the playoffs on a pass from Crosby to date. In the third, Spezza brings the Sens within 2 again, but Jordan Staal, scoring the Penguins' 7th goal of the night, seals the win for his team. Game 5 in Pittsburgh, the Penguins can finish the series. The Senators strike first and second with quick goals, but the Penguins power back. Letang from Malkin and Crosby, Kunitz from Crosby and Guerin, then Crosby from Malkin, to give the Penguins a lead that lasts just over a minute before, yes, Peter Regan ties the game.
Set it up, Regan a drive, he scores! Peter Regan with another big goal for the Senators.
The game marches into OT, then a second OT, then a third as neither goalie budges, and Pascal Leclerc plays the game of his life. Then 7 minutes into the third overtime, a man that would only score 4 goals in his entire NHL career buried his lone playoff goal as called by an extremely hoarse John Forsland.
Partner shooting one, tip, they score! Tipped out in front, Matt Partner from the point. Ottawa lives to fight another day.
Well, the Penguins still have control of this series, and there go the Senators jumping out to a 3-0 lead in Game 6. But after Alfredsson scores Ottawa's 3rd goal, the game transforms. It becomes the Matt Cooke legacy game. Cooke opens the scoring for the Pens, but Mike Fisher looks to have nullified it. But once again, the Senators lose a goal to review. I'm not sure how this goal didn't count. Orpik hit Cullen into Fleury and caused the net to go off its moorings. The Pens got away with one. Bill Guerin puts the Sens in danger in the third with a laser, and bang, Matt Cooke ties it.
Another face-off in there. To Eaton, shot it up.
Overtime comes once more, This time, the throw-in from the Marian Hossa trade wins it.
They score! Pascal Dupuis gets the goal, and the Pittsburgh Penguins will advance.
Jordan Staal assisted on the Dupuis goal, and it can't be overstated how much the man nicknamed Gronk by his teammates means to the Penguins. His role as a secondary scorer and shutdown center isn't as glorious as Malkin and Crosby, but wherever his team needs him, Staal is a terror for the opposition. That said, the Sen series belonged to Crosby, who finished the matchup with 14 points in just 6 games. So what if Fleury is .890? Sid's scoring 2 points a game. The Penguins are moving on, but where is everyone? The Pens are the only home team in an extremely top-heavy Eastern Conference to survive. The Sabres collapsed with an injured Thomas Vanek against Boston. The Devils got the playoff Chris Pronger treatment, losing in 5 to the Flyers. And the 121-point Capitals blew a 3-1 series lead to the worst team in the playoffs, losing a heartbreaking 7-game series to the Montreal Canadiens. But the Caps didn't really lose to the Canadiens. They lost to their goalie, who had become their worst nightmare, allowing just 3 goals on 134 shots as the Habs won games 5, 6, and 7. This goalie was Yaroslav Halak, and with Pittsburgh set to meet the Canadiens in the second round, he's ready to become the Pens' worst nightmare too. Halak really established himself in the regular season prior to his heroics against the Caps. He didn't completely come out of nowhere. He ripped away Game 1 starting duties from the highly touted former 5th overall pick Carey Price, who he clearly outperformed throughout the season. He was terrific in the regular season, but has found another terrifying gear. Okay, so who else is even on this team? Given how good their 2 goalies are juxtaposed to how bad the team was in the regular season, it can't be a very impressive group. Their best forward is probably Mike Camilleri, who lit up Washington for 5 goals and 5 assists in round 1. But Thomas Plekanec isn't bad, a solid 70-point guy. Brian Gionta is good, Scott Gomez is overpaid, but still decent. But the drop-off after those 4 is stark. You get down to the Kostitsyn brothers, Benoit Pouliot, Glenn Metropolitan, at least 2 of those guys have to play in the top 6. There's no real star players and mostly just a bunch of secondary options. The defense core is strange. Andrei Markov is the clear number 1, and he's great. A really strong offensive defenseman in his prime, and he has a perfect complement in the shutdown Josh Georges. There's Marc-Andre Bergeron, who the Habs don't really like to have on the ice when it's not a power play. Then there's the retirement home squad. 36-year-old Roman Hamrlik, 35-year-old Hal Gill, and the most effective of the trio, 36-year-old Jaros Spacek, who is out with injury. So in his place is Ryan O'Byrne. But wait, the Habs are playing 7 defensemen every night, specifically playing Marc-Andre Bergeron for like 5 minutes a night just on the power play. So they're dressing this 20-year-old kid, PK Subban, who's only played like 4 NHL games. Jacques Martin loves his defense. Game 1 in Pittsburgh, and I guess I undersold PK.
Second all-time for Pittsburgh, and they score! PK Subban from the point.
Despite the great start by Subban, the Habs' other PK crumples. The Pens don't dominate possession, but their high-end talent chases Halak and makes a clear statement. The massive win is compounded by Montreal suffering an injury to Andrei Markov that will end his season. On the other side, the Penguins lost Jordan Staal, but it seemed like just a freak injury that he should come back from. Montreal may have gotten lucky and stolen the series from Washington, but now they're playing a team that just won the Stanley Cup. There's no fluke happening here. And hey, Jordan Leopold will be back for Game 2. The magic is done.
Malkin to Crosby, back to Malkin, deflection and a save by Halak.
Okay, so the magic is in fact not done. The Penguins score first in Game 2 and absolutely own play, controlling an astronomical 81% of the expected goals at 5-on-5, but Halak is a brick wall. Fleury is not, as Camilleri's 2 goals serve as a game winner and added insurance. Okay, fine. that was a fluke. Halak isn't going to turn into a pumpkin, but come on, let's be real. This is the Pens series. The Pens beat Halak just once, but it's all they need as Marc-Andre Fleury slams the door on the 18 shots he faces, and Pascal Dupuis ices the game with an empty netter. See? All good. The Habs couldn't score. They're toast, especially with Stahl back for Game 4. Oh no. The Penguins respond with their clutch performers Max Talbot and Chris Kunitz snagging the lead from the Canadiens almost immediately. Fleury recovers from his tough first goal, and he and Halak duel throughout the second. Max Lapierre ties the game with a wraparound, not much Fleury could have done. The Pens drive back, and Max Talbot throws a shot into Hamrlik, and
then he's shut down on the play by Hamrlik. Pyatt across now to Giunta. Threw it in front, score! Letang!
Man, that looked like interference. I mean, I would complain, but the Penguins literally did that to themselves. Halak stonewalls the Penguins for the rest of the game, and the series is tied at 2. The Canadiens goalie will decide who wins. Bill Guerin, who missed games 3 and 4, returns to the lineup for the crucial Game 5. With Guerin returning, Ruslan Fedotenko hits the pine yet again, as he's been battling with Mike Rupp and upstart Mark Letestu for a lineup spot anyway. But with Game 5 looming, Mark Letestu and Mike Rupp are both still in the lineup despite Guerin's return. The odd man out is Ponikarovsky.
We'll talk about other guys who they acquired. Good players, better than Ponikarovsky, who didn't fit in. And invariably, it was just a matter of skating, and he was just kind of slow.
Bylsma is not afraid to scratch strong top 6 players that struggle in checking roles. He did so with Peter Sikora and Miro Shatan in the 2009 playoffs, opting for offensive black hole Craig Adams, and it worked. Ponikarovsky has been pedestrian in the bottom 6, but is he really not better than Rupp? I'm not saying Pony has been good, and I know this worked for Bylsma in 2009, but it seems like a strange decision. Well, after all that talk about the forwards, the Penguins' defense buries both of their goals, and the star of the game is Fleury. Mark is spectacular, making some saves that are just signature Fleury. People forget that he wasn't great in the 2009 playoffs. He was .908. But when the lights were their brightest, he allowed just 4 goals in the 3 games the Penguins were facing elimination. He shows up when his team needs him the most, and he does here in Game 5 as the Penguins push the upstart Habs to the brink with a 2-1 win. The Habs do get a big addition prior to Game 6, with Jaros Spacek drawing back into the lineup and moving Hal Gill to the press box. Halak is still at full power, and Camilleri opens the scoring quickly, but Crosby ties the game against his childhood favorite team, and Letang continues his coming out party with his 5th goal of the playoffs. The Pens don't keep their lead for long. Camilleri strikes again, and Spacek blisters one past Fleury to take the lead. Lapierre scores what will become the game winner early in the 3rd, a massive win in the Bell Center for the Canadiens.
Marc-Andre Fleury had his moments in that series. He did not like playing in his hometown. He never did. Weird things always happen against the Canadiens. I think to people who grow up in Montreal, like a lot of people have never even seen the Canadiens win a Stanley Cup. It's been, 31 years. But for Chris Letang and Marc-Andre Fleury, those guys who grew up in Montreal, that Canadiens logo just has an aura about it. And they just never liked playing against them, especially in that building.
Game 7, with everything riding on it, the lights at their brightest, the series heads back to Pittsburgh. Immediately, Subban, who has established himself as the Habs' new #1 defenseman with his terrific play throughout the series, lobs a puck on net that Giunta tips by Fleury. More, Camilleri, his 12th of the playoffs, and an ugly shorthanded goal by Travis Moen. The heavily favored Penguins on home ice are down 4-0. Fleury heads to the bench, replaced by Brent Johnson. His night is over, and likely is his season. The feed cuts to the distraught fans who fill the garish red seats of Mellon Arena, the Civic Arena, the Penguins' home since their inception, for what might be the last time, as the sparkling new arena, the future Consol Energy Center, sits nearly completed across the street. But the Pens haven't gone down quite yet. Kunitz and Stahl score, the latter's goal a tip off a blast from the returning Ponikarovsky. But a 4-goal deficit against the most molten goalie on the planet proves to be too much. Gionta scores again in the third, and the Penguins, the defending Cup champions no more, salute their fans and say goodbye to the Igloo in which they've played since 1967.
They won in the first round against Ottawa, and they were upset in the second round against Montreal. And if you look at how the bracket worked itself out that year, they would have played the Flyers in the next round. The Flyers weren't really, they were good, but the Penguins always beat that team. They were better than them. They would have been a heavy favorite in that series. And a couple of years later, I told Sidney Crosby, I said, man, you guys really screwed up that year. That draw opened up nice. You guys could have won the whole thing again. And he looked at me and he said, no way. And I said, what do you mean? He said, we were out of gas. He said, we'd been to the final 2 years in a row. We would have lost to somebody. And in Game 7 in particular, the last game ever played at Mellon Arena, Penguins were down 4-0, and Fleury gave up a terrible goal a minute into the game. Crosby was called for a penalty like 10 seconds into the game. The Penguins were actually like too amped up for that game, and which was odd because given their experience, they'd just won the Cup the year before. Like if you win Game 7 in Joe Louis Arena, you shouldn't be like emotionally off for a game, but they were for that game, and they admitted like they knew it could be the last game in that building's history, and that bothered them. They didn't want it to be a loss.
Well, you can't win every year. Sometimes you run into a hot goalie. I mean, look at the Caps. The big three centers are 22, 23, and 24. Letang and Goligoski are burgeoning stars on defense. They're 23 and 25, respectively. Fleury is only entering his age 26 season. This team has time, and GM Ray Shero, despite facing some more important departures, is set to retool this team as aggressively as the cap will allow. The first step is retaining Matt Cooke, who, as I said earlier, is valuable despite his dangerous play. On draft night prior to selecting offensive winger Bo Bennett, the Penguins send a third-round pick to the Flyers for the rights to pending UFA defenseman Dan Hamhuis. Hamhuis, originally a Predator, has already spurned the Flyers' advances in favor of hitting the open market. But maybe the Penguins can change his mind. He's a great player if he chooses to sign. July 1st and 2nd are difficult days for the Penguins. Gonchar is the first casualty. While still a great player, Gonchar is going into his age 36 season, and it just did not make sense for the Penguins to give the veteran the $5.5 million per year, 3-year contract that Ottawa did. A deal equal to an $8.1 million cap hit if it was signed in the 2024 offseason. There's only so much money to go around despite Gonchar's close relationship with Malkin. Leopold signs a much more reasonable contract with Buffalo, Eaton gets a well-earned raise on Long Island, and the highly sought-after Dan Hamhuis spurns the Penguins for the Vancouver Canucks for less money than Gonchar. I mean, it's 3 years more term, but he's 9 years younger. I love Gonch, but this is strange. I guess Dan really likes BC. With their defense group from the last playoffs and their primary hope to replace them gone, the Penguins strike while they still can. 5 years at $4 million to shot-blocking specialist Zebnik Michalek to serve as the Mark Eaton/Rob Scuderi of the new core, and 5 years at $5 million to Paul Martin. Now the hype train may have been around Hamhuis, but the numbers prefer Martin by a wide margin. While not the offensive driver that Hamhuis is, Martin is the far superior defensive defenseman and is no slouch as a contributor on offense. A left shot, he's built in a lab to pair with a young star like Chris Letang. Michalek, a righty, should fit great with Goligoski. And that's all without even mentioning Orpik.
Ray Shero really believed in spending a lot of money on defensemen and on having a lot of draft capital locked up on the blue line. And I think his thinking was, I've got Crosby, I've got Malkin, I've got Stahl, I've got Fleury. Like, teams can't really beat us between the pipes or at forward already. So if I can take the rest of this money and just put it all on the blue line and have a real standout blue line, who the hell's going to beat us in a series?
I think this team actually got better despite losing so many pieces. The forward group will remain pretty similar, minus the 2 Ukrainians who fell out of favor anyway, and the retiring Bill Guerin. This team has the juice, and they should be even better in 2011. Scrapper Aaron Asham and Reclamation Project Mike Comrie are really the only new faces at forward that aren't in-house promotions. It's not all roses, though. When Stahl returned to the Canadiens series, he came back too quickly. His initial injury was a lacerated tendon in his foot that he rushed to get surgery for at the time. Stahl has since had at least 4 more procedures on his foot, and now it's infected. As of September 30th, 2010, Stahl hasn't even resumed skating, according to James O'Brien of NBC Sports. He's going to miss a big chunk of time. The only question is how much. Otherwise, the Penguins are ready to roll against the Flyers to christen Consol Energy Center. For the curious, it's 28-year-old rookie Derek Engeland who rounds out the Penguins' new-look defense. Unfortunately, the Pens fail to pick up their first win in the new building, and it's the same story in Game 2 against the Canadiens. This time, Carey Price shines in net, but of course, it's 2 goals from Mike Camilleri, who is on pace to be an all-time Penguin killer. That really makes the difference. The Penguins win on the road and then lose again at home before finally winning their first game at Consol. An overtime win in their powder blues against number 1 pick John Tavares and the lowly Islanders. The game started with a vicious fight between Goddard and the Islanders' Trevor Gillies, who, shockingly, is not related to Islander legend Clark Gillies, nor any other Gillies in NHL history, from what I can tell. The Penguins aren't particularly good coming out of the gate in the 2010-2011 season, despite putting together a 4-game winning streak after the win against the Isles. 19 games into the season, they sit at 9-8-2. Just over fake 500, just below real 500. Jordan Stahl's return has been delayed because he now broke his hand, so don't expect him back anytime soon. Malkin has struggled a bit, and by struggled I mean he's just a touch under a point per game. Crosby has been terrific. So strangely has Brent Johnson, which overshadows the fact that Fleury has been bad. In 11 starts, he's .873. Which puts him right around league average for 1986. I've been hard on Mark, but he isn't this bad. The Penguins will be okay, even if he's just okay. But starting in Game 20 against the Canucks, the Penguins are more than just okay. They win their next 12 games. Fleury is in net for 11 of those games, and posts a sensational .945 save percentage. He's back. He's not even the best Penguin. Sid the Kid scores 14 goals in those 12 games, including 2 hat tricks less than a week apart. His season total is now at 26 in just 31 games. Plus, he has 25 assists just for fun. The man who was likely already the best player in the world has entered his prime.
He gets a step behind the defense and he scores! Sidney Crosby!
Chris Letang is nearly at a point per game as the Penguins' top defenseman. It may have taken this group, namely the new D-man and Fleury, a bit to get settled, but this team is scorching. The team rolls at .500 for the rest of the calendar year, bringing them to the shadow of their biggest stage yet, the Winter Classic at Heinz Field in Pittsburgh against Alex Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals.
To wear my ugly... Jeez. Said the pressure would make it grow. It did.
The Penguins at 25-11-3 sit ahead of the 22-12-5 Capitals, who are not younging nor gunning nearly as much as they were in years prior. They're really playing a complete defensive game. Boo! Give me Mike Green scoring 30 and Ovi scoring 60. Boo! The Capitals' scoring is down. In fact, going into the Classic, Crosby has the same number of goals, 32, as Ovechkin will finish the season with. The Penguins march out in their new navy blue chubby Penguin jerseys to face their interdivisional rival, joined finally by the returning Jordan Stahl. Man, if this team was this good without Stahl, now that they have him, they'll be unstoppable. At the end of the first period, Sid gets crushed by David Steckel. How wasn't that interference? Malkin scores first, but the Caps fight back with 2 goals of their own. I guess Sid's okay. He looked really shaken up after that hit, but he finishes the game. Washington takes the Winter Classic, but hey, it's just one game, however important it may seem being on national TV. The Penguins slaughter the Lightning in their next game, but in the second period, well after the game was out of reach for the Bolts, Victor Hedman hits Crosby late and from behind for no real reason. Sid looks bad, but I guess he's fine. He plays the rest of the game. According to the timeline written by the Canadian press, Crosby flies with the team to Montreal for the Pens game the next day, but is forced to head back to Pittsburgh where he's diagnosed with a concussion. The Pens lose in a shootout to the Habs. The next day, their captain gets harrowing news that his concussion is affecting his balance and ability to stand, his vestibular system. The Penguins announced that same day that Crosby will be out for a week, though Dr. Michael Collins believes it will be much longer. The Penguins lose to the Wild on the 8th, and from ESPN's timeline, Crosby speaks to the media imploring the league to better protect its players. The Penguins lose to the Bruins on the 10th, then beat the Canadiens on the 12th. On that same day, Ray Shero declares Crosby out indefinitely. There's no timetable here. He could be back in time for the All-Star game where he was the league's top vote getter. It could be after that. It could be long after that. But unlike many teams, the Penguins are lucky enough to have 2 superstars. And Evgeny Malkin has shown before that he can shoulder the weight thrust upon him by Crosby's absence. The Penguins beat the Bruins and the Red Wings, and Malkin is out. According to Bilesma, it's a sinus infection. Like Crosby, Malkin will miss the ever-prestigious All-Star game.
Toronto Maple Leaf, our biggest guardian whose growth knows no bounds.
And more importantly, a chunk of games for his team. The Penguins lose to the Devils without Malkin, but bang, they beat the Canes, shut out the Islanders in another weirdly violent game, then beat the Rangers with heroics from call-up Dustin Jeffrey. The day after the win against the Rangers, the Penguins head back to Pittsburgh to play the other New York team once again. As I've said a few times, this Islanders team is always fighting. And the Penguins, who have Rupp, Asham, and sometimes Goddard, have some willing combatants. This has resulted in these teams combining for at least one fight in each of their meetings dating back to January 19th, 2010, where Andy Sutton smashed Dupuis from behind, lighting the fuse. By the time of the February 2nd, 2011 meeting between these teams, the Islanders are completely in the dumpster and have nothing to lose. The Penguins, without their superstars, are ready to fight for all they're worth. Mike Rupp and Islander Zenon Konopka are the prime combatants tonight, and they fight in a pretty normal scrap. Who else but Matt Cooke would pour gasoline onto what was already a roaring fire? There's a big scrum in the corner after Cooke catches Rick DiPietro. Understandable. But here comes Brent Johnson down the ice with the fury of 1,000 suns. Oh, this should be fun, thought the Fabergé DiPietro, who throws off his gloves and helmet and beams as he locks up with Johnson. He isn't smiling for much longer.
But DiPietro and Johnson! And Johnson put Rick down quickly.
Johnson skates over to a cackling flurry, and DiPietro is raced to the locker room with facial fractures. Are you a lefty? DiPietro asked Johnson after being punched, according to Chris Jones of ESPN. The once highly touted 29-year-old former first overall pick, recipient of the Islanders' most infamous contract, who had finally been almost healthy in 2011 after a career full of injuries, would only play 16 more games in the NHL. Getting punched by Johnson was really all she wrote for DiPietro, an apt end to a strange career. Konopka gave a haunting quote after the game found in the Hockey News Canadian Press write-up, as the Islanders were less angry about the DiPietro shenanigans and more focused on Max Talbot's hit that wrenched the neck of Blake Como. Looking at it, it was a dangerous hit, New York forward Zenon Konopka said. We're not happy, and we're not happy with the outcome of the game. We have to remember this. Zenon, you know you led the league in penalty minutes last year, right? You know you're leading the league this year, too, right? Whatever, we'll deal with this in a little over a week. Hey, Malkin's back, and Tyler Myers interfered with him. They both tripped and slammed into the boards, and Malkin tore his ACL and MCL. No Malkin, no Sid for the foreseeable future. A couple of losses and a win bring us to the Islanders yet again.
And as Johnson was going to the locker room, having been ejected, Marc-Andre Fleury was sitting on the bench laughing hysterically at the fact that Brent Johnson had just thrown a punch and dropped DiPietro. That's what set the Islanders off. It really wasn't a whole lot more than that. Just the fact that their goaltender was hurt. Fleury thought it was funny. That's all it took. And when they met a few days later on Long Island, the Islanders called up a couple of guys from the minor leagues who were absolutely not hockey players because of their talent level. It was very much for those who have seen Slapshot at the end of the movie when, you know, all the goons are hired by the one team to play against the Chiefs in the championship game. Like, that's kind of what it was. They had like 4 or 5 professional goons in the lineup that night.
This time, the Isles have dressed Trevor Gillies and Michael Haley, pure brawlers. The Isles are going for revenge. That much is clear. Johnson is, of course, in net for the Penguins. Everyone knows this game will be vicious, but no one knows it's about to be one of the bloodiest games of the decade.
We knew it was going to be a little out of hand. There were going to be a lot of fights. Nobody knew that it would get to the point that it did.
Travis Hamonic opens the scoring, and honestly, I'm not going to bother that much with goals. The Islanders are going to blow the doors off the Pens on the score sheet. The first fight is between Haley and Craig Adams, who is wearing an A in Malkin and Crosby's absence. Adams can fight, but not like Haley, who just beats the tar out of the Penguin. After the Isles' third goal, Gillies matches up with Goddard, an even pairing. This is still a normal game, just an intense one. After the Isles make it 4-0, but before the end of the first, Tavares hacks down Letang after the defenseman boards the Isles' young star. The Islanders break the game open in the second, causing Johnson to be yanked for Fleury, and the next fight is the start of the brawls. Matt Martin jumps Max Talbot, the Islanders' #1 target, after the Penguins slashed Isles goalie Mikko Koskinen. Yes, that Mikko Koskinen. Engelin leaps to his teammate's aid, Dupuis fights with Josh Bailey, and Rupp fights with Hamonic. Everyone involved except Talbot, 3 Penguins and 3 Islanders are ejected. And the Penguins are given a 5-minute power play, where they score twice. Neat. With the game out of reach, Johnson is sent back out to tend the Penguins' goal. Brooks Orpik blasts Michael Grabner into Johnson and starts another scrap early in the period. 5 minutes into the third, the war reaches a fever pitch. Trevor Gillies runs from across the rink to smash Eric Tangradi, and as Tangradi clutches his face, Gillies starts punching him as if it was a fight. Craig Adams grabs onto Gillies to try and break up the fight, while Talbot fights with Haley. The referees begin to shove Gillies out the Zamboni door, but there are only so many refs. As they tend to Gillies, they leave Haley unattended, who has 1 target on his mind. Goddard leaving the bench is an automatic suspension for him and his coach. I don't condone it, but I understand it under the circumstances.
Ridiculous. Yeah, see you later, Trevor. Go back inside of your cage.
Gillies, Haley, Adams, and Goddard are tossed. Now you might be saying, how the hell has Matt Cooke kept his nose clean through all of this? Well, he's suspended for boarding Feder Tootin, which is probably lucky for both teams. With 4 minutes left in the game, after a whole 10 minutes of normal hockey, Tyler Kennedy cross-checks Franz Nielsen in the lower back. At the next whistle, oh, Xenon, I can't believe you haven't been tossed yet. Oh, you're going to try and kill Max Talbot now? What a surprise! Talbot, Letang, Konopka, and Okposo are removed. Another scrap immediately, this one's small. Brett Sterling and Jack Hillen are thrown out. Usually in games like this, the fighting eventually stops, but not here. With 2 minutes left, Penguin call-up Joe Vitale beats the tar out of Andrew McDonald. They're ejected, obviously. The camera cuts to the benches. 3 surplus Penguins, 4 surplus Islanders. Michael Grabner scores number 9 for the Isles, and with 2 minutes left, Ryan Craig is finally the last person thrown out of the game. The league will have something to say about this. Trevor Gillies is handed a 9-game suspension for the Tangradi attack. Tangradi was concussed by the elbow and or the punches to the head, obviously. Matt Martin gets 4 games for jumping Talbot, and finally Eric Goddard gets his automatic 10-game suspension for leaving the bench. Bylsma, as I stated, theoretically should be suspended too, but the NHL elects not to press charges, for lack of a better term.
I understand why the Islanders maybe, took umbrage with what Fleury did. I get that. That was an ambush that night, though. Like, it really was. And there was certainly a lot of hostility between those teams for many years afterwards, and you can kind of see why from the Penguins' standpoint.
The Isles are fined $100,000, a slap on the wrist. Penguins legend and owner Mario Lemieux is incensed. From Jeff Z. Klein of the New York Times, Lemieux called the game against the Islanders a travesty and said he needed to, quote, rethink whether he wanted to be a part of the NHL if the events surrounding the game, quote, reflect the state of the league. Now, I must take off my homer hat for a second. It makes sense why the Penguins made the Islanders so furious. Matt Cooke, Max Talbot, annoying guys for the opposition, certainly. The Penguins bench erupting in laughter after DiPietro got crumpled, not popular with the Islanders. I get that. Is it tough to take Mario's words on player safety at face value when he employs Matt Cooke? To a certain extent, sure. The Penguins are successful. They have stars. They have a whiny reputation, fair or not. The Isles are horrible, have a high goon per capita ratio, and are just constantly on the edge. The Penguins were the straw that broke the camel's back. Did the Penguins start it? I guess, sort of. Cooke ran into DiPietro, Talbot hit Como. But remember, these teams have been fighting each other non-stop, dating back to Andy Sutton, a guy who isn't even on the Islanders anymore, hitting Dupuis. These teams just hate each other, and one team went completely over the line, the Islanders. After all that, there is still a season going on. The Penguins are obviously not the same quality of team without their superstar, but they're still good. Fleury has been terrific, the defense is loaded even if Paul Martin is struggling a bit to find his footing, and there are still some guys who can score up front. They'll just have to adjust, but this is still a squad that can battle in the playoffs, especially if Sid returns. This is a team worth improving at the deadline, at least conservatively. February 21st, the Penguins make a massive trade. Pittsburgh sends Alex Goligoski, who, though extremely talented, has fallen clearly behind Chris Letang for top pair minutes and power play time, to Dallas, where he can step in as a true number one. For a player of Goligoski's quality, Dallas paid up. The first half of the return, Goligoski's replacement on the blue line, 24-year-old Matt Niskanen. Niskanen got Calder votes back in 2008, but his offensive production and ice time have fallen greatly since then. His underlying defensive numbers are still great, but he desperately needs a change of scenery. The second half, probably the larger portion of the return's value, sniper wing James Neal.
Time for the rookie lead in that department. With speed, walks in and scores.
Neal is already a 3-time 20-goal scorer in just his third season and plays a very solid defensive game. For a team ravaged by injury, giving up a player where you have a talent surplus to help your sparse forwards is always a good idea. On the 24th of the same month, the Penguins opt for a reunion. Back in the 2000s, as the Penguins as a business were in some of their most dire days, they were often forced to jettison some of their biggest stars. One of whom, of course, was Jaromir Jagr, whose departure from Pittsburgh is a story for another time. In 2003, the axe came for Pittsburgh's most electric player, Alex Kovalev. Kovalev was shipped off to the New York Rangers with depth pieces for a guy in Joel Bouchard, former 6th overall pick Rico Fata, who, though he played hard, was dangerously close to bust territory, tweener defenseman Richard Lintner, and Michael Samuelsson. Wait, like the Red Wings guy? Yeah, that Michael Samuelsson, huh. The Pens gave away Kovalev for what essentially boiled down to one season from Rico Fata and the pocket change the Rangers deigned to gift their drowning franchise. Now in 2011, after Fleury, Crosby, Malkin, Stahl, and a Stanley Cup, Kovalev is back in exchange for a 7th-round pick. Why so cheap? Because Kovalev is cooked. The day of the trade is Alex's 38th birthday, and while he can still stick handle and shoot, the wheels are gone. He's not really good enough to play in most top sixes, nor defensively minded enough to slot into the bottom six. But for a team as battered as the Penguins, he does pose as much needed help up front, and I mean, come on, it's fun to see it back. Fleury, who has helped drag the battered Penguins this far, cools off, but in the face of all logic, the Penguins just keep winning.
Thought it was Bylsma's best coaching performance. That the Penguins are not synonymous with playing good defense in their history. They did that season. They had to, and they did. I thought the penalty killing, the overall team defense, they were just hard to score against. They changed the way they played. You know, they didn't have Crosby or Malkin, so obviously a much, much different team. And that tells you, I think, how good that team was.
After Kovalev's acquisition, during the last 20 games of the season, Pittsburgh goes 13-5-2. They play as a cohesive unit, managing more shot attempts than their opponents in all but 3 of those final 20 games. The offense is led by Stahl, who is truly blossoming into a star, while the defense has absorbed Niskanen well and is a terrific unit, especially in their own end. There are a couple bits of bad news, even outside the constant frightening updates from the Crosby camp. James Neal, 1 goal. 1 in his 20 games with the team. A guy with a career shooting percentage of about 13.5 is suddenly shooting 2%, all while Goligoski sparkles in Dallas as their new number 1. The trade in retrospect is starting to look frightening. Matt Cooke can't stop hurting people on purpose. He elbowed Ryan McDonough in the head, so he's suspended until the end of the first round, regardless of the Penguins' status at that point.
I guarantee you, he's going to sit some games for that one. Absolutely. He had one thing in his mind, and that was to separate.
He needs to stop. This can't keep going, especially given the situation with Crosby. Cook's recklessness has reached a fever pitch, and even he admits it needs to change. Despite the late season push, the Penguins still lose out on the division to the ice-cold Flyers on a tiebreaker. So, the Penguins are the 4th seed in the East for the 3rd year in a row. Their mountain to climb without their superstars comes in the form of a very strange 103-point Lightning team.
Fakes, Steven across, they score! Steven Stamkos drives it in!
The Bolts are coached by Guy Boucher, renowned defense-first bench boss, who I assume is infuriated on a nightly basis by what is a ghastly defense core. After 20-year-old Victor Hedman, it's just a bunch of guys that are fine or worse. The mid-platoon is in front of 41-year-old Dwayne Rollison, who is still shockingly decent. The Lightning's strength lies in their star power up front. Diminutive and ageless wonder Marty St. Louis, 2010's Rocket Richard winner Steven Stamkos, and captain Vincent Lecavalier. This big three, paired with a wealth of solid secondary scorers, helped Tampa finish 7th in goals for, scoring their way out of their problems. Round 1 should be a battle. A great team without its stars against a good team with some glaring flaws. Fleury truly sparkles in Game 1, and his team needs him, as Rollison is just as terrific at the other end. It takes until early in the 3rd. Oh, there you are, James.
Beats St. Louis, gets Neal, Kovalev, shot, score!
Aaron Asham scores the goal of his life just moments later, allowing Fleury and an empty netter from Kunitz to seal Game 1. The Pens were technically outplayed, especially early, but Mark and the defense held strong, giving the potent Lightning offense fits.
Ahead to Steven Stamkos. He hit hard by Brooks Orpik.
These Penguins might just be able to go deep without their superstars. Game 2 does not go as well. Fleury can't make the big saves he made in Game 1, and his stat line looks horrific. But it's the stalwart Pens defense that allows Vincent Lecavalier to run roughshod over them. Well, I really don't know where this series is headed. Man, the Penguins could really use some heroics from Max Talbot. He's struggled a bit this year.
Lovejoy penalty upcoming, the shot, they score! Max Talbot at the other end scores.
It's Aaron Asham yet again to give the Pens a 2-0 lead.
Rob in front, the shot, they score! Aaron Asham.
But the Lightning's best player, Martin St. Louis, knots the game back up with 2 power play goals. One late in the 1st and one early in the 3rd. Despite having the best penalty kill in the regular season, the Penguins' PK has been lost at sea over the last 2 games. But at the same time, I'm not sure what they really could have done on that second goal. The Penguins answer St. Louis' goal 31 seconds later. What a season from Tyler Kennedy, whose shooting volumed his way to 21 goals this year. The Pens, Fleury included, are in Secret Service mode for the rest of the game, blocking everything and hurling themselves in front of pucks, clinging on to give the Penguins a 2-1 series lead. Game 4 is shockingly similar to Game 3. The Penguins go up 2-0 with the second goal from Aaron Asham before Marty St. Louis starts to take it all away. The Penguins nearly hold on to their 2-1 lead this time, but the Lightning score a goal that, I'm not sure how to describe this in any other way, looks like a heartbreaker that would have been scored against your youth team. The series marches into its first overtime, then trudges into its second. Finally, it's James Neal with one of the most perfect shots I've ever seen to win it, and he slams the glass, celebrating with the Yinzer in a Ben Roethlisberger jersey on the other side. The Pens are now up 3-1 in the series, and would you look at who's skating? Now, is Gino coming back in this series or anytime soon? Probably not. But late in the playoffs? Who knows? The Penguins at home have a chance to move on, and they get absolutely embarrassed. They just get owned. Fleury gets pulled, and somehow Johnson is significantly worse. 4 more power play goals for the Lightning, and I have to suggest that the Penguins stop taking penalties. 8-2 is the final score. It's the kind of game that lofts a series that seemed completely settled up into the air. The Penguins need Game 6. Dupuis, a valuable Pen who had fallen silent in the playoffs to this point, opens the scoring at St. Pete times Forum. When Teddy Purcell scores to tie the game later in the first, it becomes apparent that Fleury has entered flailing mode. He's rattled. Sean Bergenheim gives the Bolts the lead, but Pittsburgh waterbug Chris Connor has a chance to tie it up with a penalty shot.
Against Rolison. To tie the game, and he mishandles the puck.
Jordan Stahl finally ties the game in the third, but it doesn't last long as loathable Steve Downey and Pittsburgh's own Ryan Malone, now of Tampa Bay, solidify a Lightning victory. With their season on the line, the Penguins bombard the Bolts in Game 7. Shot after shot, chance after chance, but Rolison shuts them down. Sean Bergenheim scores the only goal. The Lightning win the game and the series. Now, a 7-game loss for the Penguins would have seemed reasonable going into this series, but man, like this is tremendously demoralizing for a team whose captain and face's career is still in limbo. A reality that sinks in once again without a team in the playoffs to distract from it. Dan Bylsma, deservedly so, is the Penguins' lone award winner, taking home the Jack Adams for keeping the team from falling apart after all it went through. Throughout the offseason, Crosby will start and stop training repeatedly, and his symptoms refuse to subside. Malkin will be back for Game 1 of the 2011-2012 season, maybe Sid too, but it's looking more and more doubtful.
Right side of Letang, and redirect by Crosby, in the net it goes, and the Penguins take a 1-0 lead. Oh, let's go hunt moose on a Harley.